Well, hello and welcome to PM Express, and today we're definitely talking about a subject that is very, very dear to my heart. It's a subject that every time I sort of make an apology before I go into it because I get so emotional and probably won't make any sense. We're looking at set up to fail, deplorable schools in a rural area. As a country, as Ghanaians, we have this pseudo-elitism culture which we refuse to accept, but we have adopted it. And therefore, schools and, the dancemans and the airport and the cantonment seem to have all the privileges and perks and teachers and computers and everything there is to make a child set up to succeed. However, the further you go away from the capital, the story changes. The state of the school, the environment, the school may not even have any toilets. You may have to walk miles to get there. And sometimes, with all best intent and purposes that the teacher may have, there's just nothing there to aid that teacher to impact anything positive into that child. So the child has come from a home where the parents don't see schooling as that important anyway. For them, it's a formality. Then they come to the school setup, which just looks like a punishment or a curse. And the result is clear. You drive past any traffic lights and you see the results. We should turn things around. But you look at the nation and you ask yourself, are we making this a priority? Because if the percentages and the statistics of schools that don't have any toilet facilities, it's amazing. You build a whole school, classrooms and everything, and not a single thought that of all the children in this school, if they need to attend to nature's call, what should happen? Every nation's future is clearly seen in the present of the children. And so if we look at the kids today, we definitely know what our future is. No matter how much we pray, fast, jump, jig, dance, our future is definitely in whatever the children are today. My name is Nana Sakwao, and when I come back, we are looking at set up to fail. Then move.
I'm a product of schools, and at least some of the schools can be described as death traps.
Frankly speaking, the structure is so bad that even you and myself would not like to put our animals under it.
We are pleading His Excellency we are pleading on him so that he can help us and build a school building for us so that we can study for a better future.
Children want to play.
Little children want to play.
Rain, rain, go away.
Rain, rain, go away.
A very apt rhyme to start the day at Ranger DA School in the Karachi Chimuri district of the Volta region. With such school structures, pupils have no choice but to repeat this rhyme and appeal to whoever is in charge of the universe to suspend the rains, especially during school hours. This time, not for the children to play, but for them to learn. At a nearby school in Chinderi STA GHS, Pupils planning to write the basic education certificate examinations next year do not have the luxury of time, so they plead to a higher power to stop the rains.
Papa is slow. Onibia a fache, Nati and Pipe. Papa had the bonnier for Yensen Fantasy Bejuna. Number one, Minty. Papa is slow. So, Bema, if you beton papa, slow to Chamumai. Nama is here, Papa, if you say you talk, a best say class me into music. Papa is so impetus at the back. It is slow. Man's you to win is or the basic Amen.
We do this every morning. About 56 schools are under trees, in mud houses with thatch roofs or under sheds. So when the clouds gather, the pupils have no choice than to run home for shelter.
Anytime it rains, the water comes into the class, and the teacher cannot also stand in the water. Anytime we are writing, if it is raining, you see the water spoiling our books, so we can't learn.
So what do you do?
Then, because of the rain, we don't get time to study again, so they close us. And when it is getting to exams, you see, we didn't treat some topics, so they can set a question that we didn't treat, and most of us fail because of that.
God knows what is good for his children. So when God allowed the rain to come, fine. But we pray to him that he shouldn't distract our class.
So do you remember one day that you prayed and then it really rained? What did you say to yourself when that happened?
I thought that, God, I said to myself, because we were treating a topic that is very important. Every topic is important, but there is some topic which is very important. So when it is about to rain, we pray that God should listen to our prayers, but it rains and we.
Chicken pox is under what? Contagious disease.
On this occasion, the pupils' prayer appeared to have been answered. The teachers have therefore resorted to starting classes ahead of normal school hours so that pupils can get more hours of learning. But that is only if the rains don't pour in the mornings.
That's a lot, plenty. We can't mention all, but the few is sometimes our lessons are cut short. We have to come back. We can't complete our syllabus, just like other schools have to finish because our times are cut short. Sometimes too, when we come just after the rain, we can't be in the class because it will be leaking. So we stay outside and maybe do the lessons outside. That's what we do. We start lesson at 8:30 or 8 o'clock. But we come here as early as 6:30 and start our lessons in order to cope or capture those missing the lost time. That's what we do here.
At a nearby school, Quadrifoot DA, all classes are in the sheds with thatch roofs. Established about 35 years ago, some of the pupils do not have chairs. While some of the classrooms have straw walls, others are without any screens at all, leaving the pupils vulnerable to distractions by goats freely roaming the school compound. If you missed it, Kente has been spelled as Kante. Some parents recall being pupils in the same school and are disappointed that their children are studying under the same appalling conditions they used to. Out of the blue, the clouds quickly gather. Pupils gather their books ready to run out. One of them goes to the rescue of the national flag hanging from the pole in the middle of the school compound.
I said when will be ready my them. But some things need to be said and ten. Can you let it out to the basket? I will get into this.
That's how school ended that day.
One day you go be, one day you go be. But when one day will come, one day you go be, one day you go be. But when one day will come, they say the only time parliamentarians they agree is when they talk about raising their own salary. One day you go be, one day you go be. But when one day will come.
I go back to Chinderi SDA Primary School, where pupils earlier prayed to God to stop the rain. I find some of the pupils trapped in the classrooms. This time, the thatch roof only strains the heavy downpour that confines the pupils to a section of the classroom. Ofosu Emmanuel, who prayed against the rains earlier, is disappointed.
What I feel right now is we couldn't learn at all.
At Nafeba DA Primary, pupils have to ration learning. Aside waiting for teachers to finish with other classes before attending to them, pupils would also have to share blackboards. The assistant headmaster of Nafeba DA, Richard Bombom, said the poor infrastructure is demoralizing, but he chose to stay because of his passion for the children.
So for the children, we are now trying to, even those in class 5, if you ask them something about even class 3, most of them cannot answer.
Like what, for example?
I could remember when I was teaching them math multiplication, I asked one of them 4 times 1. He's a male student. He couldn't answer 4 times 1 in class 5. So we're now telling the headmaster if there will be something, then we can't promote them like that. We can't promote them to move to class 6 whilst they are still not gotten the basis. So we are just starting, even those in class 5, where sometimes I teach them with things in class 3, class 2 thereabouts. Even class 4 things they can't.
Richard Bombon selected the best pupil in primary 5, and I randomly asked them to spell house.
H-U-R-S.
Yeah. That's it. House, your friend, H-O-U-S-E. Spell that means
H-O-U-E-S.
The Karachi Inchimuri District Education Office is not happy with the performance of the pupils, and they also blame inadequate teachers as part of the problems facing education in the district.
We have many of our classrooms lying fallow, no teachers, empty classrooms. So definitely these children see that staying in school is useless, so they run back home. So we still have a lot of them as dropouts. Without fear of contradiction, I can say that we need more than 500 teachers to service our vacant classrooms as I sit now. To me, they are trying their best. The few teachers we have who are handling them, we always advise them, give them the necessary support to also give up their best. So we are trying, but it is not the best. It's just because the challenges are too many. Yeah, I have to admit, the grades are weak grades. They are not strong. That is the facts of the matter.
I'm sure by now you understand why I said I get, sometimes emotional and maybe not make complete sense out of the whole matter. But, basically this is the human resource we have to face 2020. You know, when the Germans are doing driverless cars, when Japan is sending, manless space missions, this is what we have. You know, straw thatch houses, human beings praying for rains to stop and running home when it rains. With me in the studio, Dr. Prince Ama, education consultant. Doc, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Actually, Doc is going to be, our in-house education consultant. You have to register him, PM Express Education Consultant. And then Jojo Kobna, who did this beautiful piece to bring this story to let us know that the whole Ghana is not Kumasi or Accra. There is indeed other sides of Ghana that's not good to be told. But, Doc, you know, how common is this story that we're seeing?
Well, good evening to your cherished viewers. I think that this is just one of several other problems, or schools having similar problems. And as a country, we need to develop proper intervention and more effective commitment to addressing this imbalance. It has a huge effect on the life chances of the young person. And so it's very common, especially in the rural areas. And the evidence is there. The Ghana Education Service is aware, the Ministry of Education is aware of the structural imbalance in terms of education input, quality, including access, and then output or learning outcome.
I mean, Jojo, how heartbreaking was it for you? I mean, you went out there. I mean, how heartbreaking was it for you? So some of the stories, it's like an exaggerated comedy. You know, it's like, yeah, you know, something maybe out of Nollywood, and then you have to exaggerate it for it to look funny.
I had to put myself in the shoes of the children because I have never studied in such a condition. And so looking at the children and how they were very hungry to study, they wanted to study, they wanted to. If you saw the full documentary, Emmanuel Ofosu, the young boy, said he wanted to be a doctor, and no matter what, he wanted to move out from Kratchi. And so he was very emotional. He said, no, I mean, how can we pass this examination? And what is very interesting is that the DCE of the area also told us on camera that he's also a product of Schools Under Trees. And for 32 years, the school that he attended is still in the same state. So, I mean, it was sad. It was sad, I mean, getting into the story, getting to know how people's really, and what really makes it very extremely sad is the inequalities. We having the urban centers and maybe other areas with very, very, very good schools, and then looking at the rural areas having very bad schools, and we expect them to perform the same. And now that we have free SHS, we expect them to pass so that they can enjoy free SHS, but some of them will not. Because about 27%, last year, 27% of pupils in Kratchi and Chimono could not be placed because, I mean, they had performed very badly.
So let's hear what the DC says.
It's not the best. I'm not happy. Because if children study under deplorable situation or situations, you can't expect the best from them. And these children are our future leaders. As I said earlier, education is key to development. So we need to give them very good conditions. They should study under very good conditions so that they can also put up their best. The performance is below average. Catching Chumrum, the performance is below average, and I'm not happy.
Well, that was the DCE. Doc, I mean, are we stuck with the situation? Because issues about schools under trees and stuff like that. But before I let you come in, I give two examples. One, my grandfather, two, my dad. They all started school in Abomusu. They moved to Chebi. From Chebi, my grandfather went to Abusco. My father went to Prempeh. They came to Legon. My father went to Leeds. Grandfather went to Cambridge. And they all came back and they were they made it in life, starting from rural areas. So where did it stop that as soon as you were in a rural area, that was the end? Because many, most of the old guards, started in some villages where probably, you won't find on the map. But they were able to study, maybe not in the trees, but in a rural area and make it out. So what happened? Well,
I think that in the previous era, they were population was slow. There were direct access from here to the UK to do courses there, and so regardless of where you are coming from, so as long as you can write your exams, pass, there's access for you to write international examination. Sometimes you can even stay at home here in Ghana and write corresponding courses. So the opportunities were available as compared to now. To get the opportunity, you had to pass. I mean, at least Hafa, also, went to school in, I've forgotten the town, and he said at their time they could even write, they couldn't speak English, but they could write it or something. They had some, and they all talk about how it started in a rural area, but they were able to impart them well. Good. So I'm coming to that. So now, we're talking about population increase, and we're talking about expanded access. So we've got expanded access to primary school, junior secondary school with less quality input to support the access. So the access is not corresponding to the input that are supposed to support quality education. So that's been one of the major challenges. All our policy imperatives looks at how do we enroll more people in school. The primary school, for example, we are trying to meet, when we were trying to meet the MDG, the Millennium Development Goals, we're looking at access to primary school at for all Ghanaian children. So regardless of the facilities available, we must expand access. So, and that's, once you expand access, you need more books, you need more teaching and learning materials, textbooks, you need computer labs, you need more teachers, you need classrooms, you need desks, So if these are not available and you have expanded access, you have a classroom, 40 people, 50, 60, and you have one teacher, it becomes difficult for the teacher to have a control and to be able to deliver quality lessons, which will result in improved learning outcome. So these are the areas, and that's why these are the areas that are underpinning the problems we are facing. And in order to address that, we need to go back to try to address the disparities, because in most cases, if you look at the quality input, they are determined by geographic location. We have 74 districts which have been described as deprived, out of the 216, deprived according to some index. And so children in these deprived districts are also deprived in terms of basic or fundamental teaching and learning tools and resources. So we have to look at providing funding, targeted funding, especially to deprived districts. There were some programs. One of them, I think, GPEG program that tried to provide funding to some selected basic schools. I'm trying to, in order to see how this funding can support, production of learning materials and improve the quality there. So what we need to do is to try to bridge that gap, because there seems to be too much attention on supporting the urban areas at the expense of the rural areas. However, in terms of the intervention being done, from where I sit and from what I know, I think that the government, recognizing this structural weakness, is undertaking what we call an equity analysis of the whole education system. What is the access in terms of male, female? What is access in terms of rural and urban? What is access in terms of even regional variations? How about achievement? How are people achieving? Achievement in terms of rural, urban, achievement in terms of gender. All these things I understand is ongoing, and trying to do an analysis of the structural weakness so that we can be able to fit it into our plan and provide funding to address that. But largely, it is an issue of social injustice and inequity to see more of our young people who are at the rural areas not having the requisite, support to be able to do well in school. And these are people who are going to compete with those in the urban areas in terms of access to junior secondary school, in terms of access to senior secondary school, and in terms of access to university. And largely, studies all over, within Ghana and across Ghana, tends to show that people who are, from relatively low background, low income background, like children in these deprived areas, have less opportunity of having access to secondary school, university. Now, if we say that education is a tool to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor, with this trend, the rich will continue to be rich and the poor will continue to be poor. So it's a major national issue for us to look at it holistically and address it. But I think that something is being done. The issue is that education output takes a long time to mature. Policy interventions have to be translated into activities or actions, and then translate into learning outcome. But we need to set our priority right. We have to put it within the context of a current secondary school program. We are investing so much. As we speak now, 25% of our budget on education goes to secondary school, 25% goes to university, the rest of them very, very, very few. So when you look at the trend, you see that the lower you go, the lesser investment. And the investment that goes in there are almost very often recurrent expenditure, payment of salaries, with little in capital expenditure. So we have to look at this and see how we can.
Jojo, Doc was saying about something being done and very little capital expenditure. Now, if you look at the speed with which the population is growing, and is growing at this level where they can't afford, anything. I mean, are we likely enough to, get to a stage where we can catch up as they are reproducing? Because in order for the population to slow down, we have to educate them. In order to slow down population, you definitely need to educate the girl so that there's no need for her to get pregnant at 16, 14, 13. But then when are you going to build these structures and put the girl in there to educate him to slow? I mean, are we stuck in a vicious cycle?
That's how I feel. That's why I feel that government should, as a matter of emergency, like urgency, start something immediately and say that, okay, because of the structural inequalities that we've had, so we are just going to invest more in rural communities. And when they do that, it's going to sort of bring it up. You see, in Karachi district, 56 schools are in a very bad condition. So what I also realized was that it was a community.
Alone, 56,
yes. They come together, they build a school, and then there are no teachers, and sometimes they call community teachers, they pay them. So Ghana Education Service, for example, will just bring about two teachers, and they would have to get community teachers who are not very qualified to also help, and then they pay, they contribute and they pay. So the people are actually doing something, they are contributing. They are not reneging on their responsibilities, they're doing something. So government, I don't know what stops government from coming out and saying, okay, this year, we are just going to invest heavily in this. We are going to solve this particular problem. We're going to give them more teachers. We are just going to give them more textbooks. And one heartbreaking thing is, this is something that is happening now. The Senate East District, as I speak, 20 schools have no textbooks. 20, no textbooks. So why? I mean, other countries are sending people to space, and why can't we send textbooks to Senate?
I mean, in our lifetime, or this is our fate, Doc?
I think that the issue can be addressed. Everything boils down to political commitment. The first point is that we need to understand that we have such a challenge. We have this problem. And if I go through all the policies that government has altered, like the education strategic plan, the education sector review report, you can see clearly, read that they have identified that we have this problem.
On paper, they will not have an issue.
Yes. So the issue now,
on paper there, no.
The issue now is that once we have been able to identify that, like the program we are running, civil society organizations, you know, and the public must impose pressure on government to consider, you know, expanding access and improving quality education at the rural areas as a matter of priority.
Doc, you see, I think as a people, another place where we shoot ourselves in the foot is, you see the, the stable design that we built, the 6 classroom block, which is literally class 1 to 6 there. Some of the price tag they put on there, I mean, you could build in East Legon for that. So, in our own dishonesty, you know, instead of building 4 or 6 of those, we just build one, and Joe Blocks, who's a party member, you know, takes the money and go away. So and if one district needs 56, when are you going to get 56 times 250,000 Ghana cedis for just one district before you move to, you know, the next district? So we seem to be shooting ourselves in the foot from all directions.
It has to do with how we are applying the funds. For example, somebody says that, oh, we have the money, so we should feed some people in secondary schools. And you know, I've made this point that, for example, the free SHS, very good policy, fantastic, provide expanded access to secondary school, but you don't have to feed kids. So if we were to save that money, because we have money, they say we have the money to do it. Why can't we save that money, go invest somewhere, you know, especially at the basic level? Mm-hmm. So it's about how we are applying the funds. And if you look at it carefully, I see cultural issues here. I see cultural issues here. In our context, in our cultural context, the attention is much more on the adult. The adult is giving much more attention. Rules appears to support adults than children. And so when it comes to even education financing, and you look at the ladder, the structure, you see that the adults are receiving much more funding than the young people. You know, unlike the developed world, in the developed countries, and I will take Britain for example, because that's where I've worked. They spend much more funds on at the lower level. Spend much more funds at the lower level.
Build the
basics. Yes, and then they spend much more money in capital expenditure, capital and infrastructure support. We are not doing that. Indeed, if you are to look at the budget items, you will see that we are doing, for example, in terms of capital expenditure in, say, a primary school, we are doing less than $1 million. Whilst we are less than $1 million Ghana cedi, whilst we are doing more than 2-3 million Ghana cedi probably in recurrent expenditure. I can't recall the figures, but it looks very scary. So we need to set our priorities right. We need to investigate where these monies are going. It seems that we are paying more. We need to find out. We still talk about lack of teachers, but the monies allocated there are very huge. Where are they going?
Let me take a quick break.
That we have to
come back to Jojo and talk about priorities, because he was out there on the field. He spoke to the education guys. What was the priority? Is it just on paper, or there's some actual commitment coming from somewhere? Don't move. Well, conversation is based on Set Up to Fail, documentary that was done by Jojo Kobna, multimedia journalist in-house, and very, very touching one. Jojo, priority, I mean, you speaking to people, it's on paper, it's emotional, but are there any signs of something happening?
No. When I spoke to the Karachi district, in Chimuru district, I told them, okay, why are you not building the schools? Tell me why. Because you have the common fund, you should be raising money. Then the man opened he opened the books and said, oh, we don't generate anything. Our only source of revenue is the market. And the market only opens, it's just once a week, like 3 markets. And so that's where we just tax people and we take some money from. So they don't have the resources. And so we are happy. I mean, the priority, we're saying, oh, well, education is the key and we have to make sure that we invest, but we don't invest. That is what I saw. It is just talk. We just being excited and saying that, hey, we have to invest, but we're not investing, where people don't have textbooks, they don't have anything, they don't have computers. and they are all expected to write ICT examination. And
in your did you speak to any traditional leaders in there?
No. I did not speak to, but I spoke more with the school management, the parents who are there, and then the DCE, and then the supervisors, and all those people. Yes, I spoke to, now I remember, I spoke to the one man representing the king of Nafeba, a chief of Nafeba. That is one community. And he could not speak because he spoke a very different language from me. So the son spoke on his behalf. And he told us how they had invested. And you could see they erased a shed with aluminium sheets, but the wind was bad, so it blew off. And he personally invested. So he said, oh, we have been doing this, so can you tell government to do more?
In your conversation, the issue of improvised structures, i.e. like a porter cabin, you just buy a porter cabin, plunk it there, and becomes a classroom. In probably maybe what, $5,000 or something, you could get one rather than the 200, and and it probably could be there for a few years. I mean, the improvised structure, something cheaper. Did they come up in the conversation?
Well, what the people know is mud houses, and then they don't even get enough of wood to erect. I mean, a wooden structure. A wooden structure could even last them more. But so that is what I feel that government has to be creative, has to find creative ways of giving pupils decent classrooms. And so there should be a way where we can give children not necessarily brick and mortar, but give them a classroom that is befitting, that they can study under, that when the rains come they don't have to pray to God for God to suspend the rain. And I feel that is where we are lacking. We are not being creative with how to provide good structures. I mean, 60 years of Ghana. I think we should have moved ahead.
Doc, I mean, I'm sure you've seen a porter cabin. You can buy a used porter cabin to house 20 children. So if you need 6, you put it together. You have a school. Have one for toilet and bath, or 2 toilets. And I'm sure the kids will be happy to go and sit in there and learn. Environment is clean. I mean, why are little things so beyond us?
Well, I mean, the issue, to me, I think that it has to do with how we care about these little things, and what seriousness we attach to. Usually it's when a disaster occurs that you see that we are much more interested in trying to address a specific issues. But so as long as nothing has happened and nobody is injured, it's not a problem. You recall the school where a situation where a school collapsed and several children died. That's where we got awakened by the situation at hand. But what is important for us to recognize is that we need to get safeguarding laws around children, and that people are held responsible for what happens.
Well, the laws are there.
If we have, yes, but but in terms of when you hand over a child to school, something happens. There are regulations elsewhere. There are specific safeguarding regulations.
See, but the thing is
that addresses this, because
if
somebody has to take responsibility for some of these things.
If I hand over my ward to any of these structures, and I say, well, if anything happens to my ward, I'll come and hold. I mean, is this a structure to hand over your ward to in the first place, to go and hold anybody accountable? If you look at what's on the screen now, this is what the state has provided. So it's like the law is null and void from start.
Yeah, so that's why we have to continue to ask government to provide support especially for those in these situations. There are areas that they have identified that require immediate attention, and immediately, and I don't know how long it will take for us to organize a befitting 4 or 5 classroom structure for them.
No, as soon as you bring the classroom structure, then you're talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of cedis for some contractor to come and build. And you go and look at his house he's living in, and you look at the school he's built, and if they show you both bills, you'll be shocked that how are you able to build your house with this money in an expensive area, and the rural area where the chief has given you the land for free. And sometimes you even get cheap labor too. The cost is just phenomenal. I've said this 1,000 times. Porter cabins. Just porter cabins, which people use for offices. I mean, they can last good 10 years, 20 years, God knows. And by then, we'd have more money to buy more porter cabins. I don't know. I haven't heard the conversation of improvised schools. It's all the brick, mortar, cement issue, which is nothing less than 200,000 Ghana cedis.
Yeah, I mean, so of course we've got engineers around. I mean, we should be looking at that aspect of providing cost-effective structure as well. Pending we having access to the fund to do to set up a full 6 classroom blocks, say for a primary school, that can last. But we also have to recognize that in providing this support, we will have to look at those in the urban areas and what they are receiving. And so it's about innovation. It's about looking at what is happening elsewhere. How are people provided the support in terms of the infrastructure? How do we leverage on our local materials, to develop structures in the meantime, pending us, because we don't have to allow people to sit under these conditions for something to happen before. I was just
coming to Jojo to say, look, you see, your title is very, very profound, because if in 2017 you can literally look at a child and say, look, you're set up to fail, and you are about 90% right, I mean, that's an indictment on all of us. In 2017, to just look at a child and know that, look, you're set up to fail. It's not that the child is a truant, it's not that the child is a drug addict, depressed or anything, but it's like you have no opportunity.
It's a system that we have.
You see, a lot went into getting the title, because we looked at...
It's very apt.
We looked at the infrastructure not there, learning materials not there, teachers not there. We looked at even the very dangerous structures, and we looked at everything, and we're like, well, what is the percentage of pupils, I mean, who would pass from such districts? And we said, no, it looks like the system already is set up to disadvantage them. And so, and you know, Nana, 8 schools have been marked in that place as death traps. The DCE said that that school you saw with very huge crack, it is a slight wind or even children playing, if they push the wall, it will collapse. Are we waiting for 6 children to die, like what happened in February, before we do something?
Well, if your father or your mother has not, got any quote-unquote name or known, then yes, we'll have to sit and wait.
And what happened? I remember the first time when the school broke down, the government went there, organized funerals for them, give them. Why do we want to organize funerals for our children? Why don't we provide for them the money for the funerals and all those things? Why can't we just invest it? And that is what is mind-boggling.
Doc, it's it's a prophecy. It's already written there. But I don't know. It's very frustrating for me. I don't know what communities can do. I don't know how much traditional rulers should also come in. But I don't know.
You see, when it comes to basic education, the laws have imposed provision delivery of basic education to the district assemblies. You see, so if you look at the local government at 462, it will tell you that if a child is of school going age and is not in school, the district assembly should ensure that the child is in school. And if the parent cannot pay, the district assembly should pay for the parent, for the child to be in school. So we have the laws there. If the assemblies are strengthened and have the capacity, they should be able to provide the school infrastructure, able to provide facilities and resources Because that's why the schools are called DAs and so on. Because they are district assemblies, the MAs and the rest. Because the law place these schools under the operations of the assembly. But because we have this weakened somehow.
But could it be the fact that, I mean, these children are probably now caught in a vicious circle where the parents themselves have not got that much use for the school, or not too much enthused about the school, and so they are not out there agitating. If you like, go and catch the youth organizer of their political party and see how much they will come out. But the same people will come and leave their children here and go home happily without agitating that, no, we ain't taking our children here.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting observation. But I think that in this current situation we find ourselves in the current world, every parent, or most parents now, want to get their children in school.
No.
But
no, yeah,
especially in the rural areas where you have virtually non-existent schools and parents want to get their children in schools, what can they do?
No,
unless
even though I always praise my own republic, if I tell you where the school is and where the community is, and if you go and ask how many parents have even bothered to pass by here to find out what's happening in this school, zilch. And I always tell them off.
I get that.
Zilch. No, not one single parent will ever step in the school to find out. And so if you bring the teachers from outside and they're teaching children whose parents are just 100 meters away but never bothered to come here, if your parents are not bothered, why should I be bothered? So as a traditional ruler, I over-concern myself with almost every child and the teacher so that we don't lose. So I'm the sole PT, for everybody, so that we don't lose that gap. So the parenting is a huge
I get
issue.
what you are talking about is parental involvement. That's different. And for parental involvement, the studies research shows that people whose parents have themselves attended school and have higher education background, they are much more involved in their children's education. Beyond parental involvement, the parents will take their child to school. They have sent them to school. As to what the child does in school is none of their business. They don't care about it. That's the difference.
Okay.
So what I'm talking about is the fact that they want their child to go to school, checking homeworks, ensuring that the child leaves early and everything is done well in school, and that they check their assignment. That's not something that they do. But largely, you will see that parents, even if they are poor, they still want to see their children be in school. So,
but Doc, would you leave your daughter or your son under one of these structures? Imagine you moved into an area and this structure is there. I mean, would you take your son there?
See, that the issue is about background. If the people there don't have the background, they don't have the income. See, in Ghana, all the regions in Ghana, Greater Accra is the only region that has the highest population of private schools. So we are not than public schools. All the rest, there are more public schools than private schools. So when you are in Accra and you see more private schools, you see quality of education to mean what you see in the private schools. Because they're very often, you see people are doing well, you see nice classrooms and the rest. You're unable to see what is happening in the rural areas. In the rural areas, they have no option. And they can't just allow their kids to stay at home. So in the midst of scarcity, what do? You just enjoy the benefit. What is available.
That's what time would allow us. But I hope that Aisha will bring this topic back so we continue. I think it's a subject that we need to drum home more and more. I want to say thank you so much for Jojo Kobna for bringing this out. Even though we know sometimes when you see the pictures, it just brings it home to reality. But thank you very much. We're back to do this all over again. Guys, thank you.